Welcome to F1 Coffee Corner, Full Beans. I'm your host as always, Terry, and I'm here to keep you up to date with all of the unbiased, hard-hitting Formula 1 news. So grab your favourite mug of coffee, sit down, strap in and get yourself comfortable to join in the conversation. Because this is F1 Coffee Corner. This is Full Beans, the must-have podcast for all Formula 1 fans. Welcome to F1 Coffee Corner, Full Beans, the podcast. I'm your host, as always, Terry. This week's show, what have we got in store? We've got a quick look at the news that's dominating the Formula 1 headlines, because this is a Formula 1 news podcast. We've got a look back at the Australian Grand Prix and what were the winners and losers, and also that controversy that was Fernando Alonso and George Russell with that last lap incident. And then we've got a quick look forward to the Japanese Grand Prix this weekend and what can we expect from that Grand Prix, which normally is held in the autumn, so later on in the year, coming a lot earlier for some teams. That's going to suit some teams. It's going to be a disadvantage for other teams, but we're going to unpack all of that, what to look out for, what can we expect from it, who's bringing what upgrades that we know so far. And yeah, that's pretty much the state of play. That's the grid lineup. Just a bit of housekeeping from me. If you haven't already, please hit that follow, like, subscribe button, whichever one's open to you. It would mean the absolute world to me. And yeah, with that in mind, let's grab some coffee as always, sit down, strap in, and get into the Espresso news. Welcome to the Espresso news. In terms of stories, there's two main ones that are dominating the Formula 1 headlines. Luckily, they're not involving Red Bull for a nice change this season. So the first one we're going to talk about, let's talk about Liberty Media acquiring the rights for MotoGP. Now, this announcement was done on April Fool's Day. You couldn't write it, could you really? But it is a true announcement. It is real. Liberty Media have brought the rights for MotoGP for 4.2 billion euros. Now, that includes 1 billion euros worth of debt that MotoGP currently have with Dorna, their current rights holder. Now, what do I think of this? I think that there's two ways to look at this. From what Liberty Media is saying, there's not going to be a big scope for a crossover. There might be a few standalone crossovers between Formula 1 and MotoGP, but they're not looking to align the two. Two reasons for this. One, because it's quite difficult to do so. And secondly, because of the Competitions Commission. Now, we know that Bernie held the rights for both of these in the past, and that there was a sale force because they didn't want one company or one person owning both sets of rights. Hence why MotoGP was sold off on Formula 1 in the first place in terms of commercial rights holding. So what they're doing to get around this is quite simply they're going to leave Dorna as it is, as a standalone business, but put it under Liberty Media umbrella. They're going to keep the current CEO in place. They're going to keep the current location in Madrid, I believe it is, and they're going to run it as a standalone business. This is to get around that complaints, that competition monopoly, sorry, not the complaints department. Well, there will be some complaints, but the competition department. So they're going to try and make out that it's a separate company, a separate entity, and therefore the rules don't apply to it. Will they get away with it? I don't know. Interesting bit of news that Liberty Media have also brought into Formula E as well. So they are building up quite a monopoly in terms of, the motorsports rights holding, which I'm sure someone's going to have a hard look at. The deal's expected to be closed by the end of this year because they're expecting some resistance, hence why they keep it separate. What I think it will do, I think MotoGP, they need that shot in the arm in terms of getting the commercial value for them. I think Liberty Media, there's no doubt about Liberty Media's ability to make money. Let's be honest about it. They've certainly done that with Formula 1. So I'm expecting that to happen. I'm fully expecting like a Netflix series because that's how they cash in on it. It's worth a lot of money. Why wouldn't, Netflix do it? They've done it with everything else, not just Formula 1. So I am fully expecting that to happen if this takeover goes through. So don't be surprised to see that one. But I am expecting it to be treated separately so they can get around, like I say, this competition monopoly thing. So I'm not expecting it to change too much for MotoGP at the moment. It might make a difference with the tracks in terms of renegotiating, and it might make a difference in terms of pricing. We know that Liberty Media are definitely at the high end when it comes to pricing. So that's probably the disadvantage for the fans going forward. It will be access to tracks, what tracks they can choose, and also how much Liberty Media charge the tracks, which then therefore gets passed on to the average spectator. So that's probably the big concern, I think, if you're a MotoGP fan. But I don't see much for a crossover happening. Like I say, maybe some special events, maybe a couple of tracks where they can incorporate it. But Liberty Media have already come out and said that they're not looking to negotiate joint contracts at all. So I think they will be two separate businesses. But interesting that Liberty Media making a move on that front as well. Now we're looking at the other bit of news, which was, of course, David Sanchez, who was yesterday announced by McLaren that he's leaving his role after literally like a probation period, really. It's 12 weeks, isn't it? So whether or not David didn't pass his McLaren probation period remains to be seen. They're quoting that it was a difference of opinions in the sense of the job wasn't what he signed up to do. It doesn't look like there's any gardening applied to it in terms of gardening leave, so it looks like McLaren have left him free to go and join somebody else on the grid. I imagine there'll be a few teams certainly looking at it. We've got Sauber, who are on a big recruitment drive. We know they've just got Max Verstappen's former chief engineer. He's joined Sauber this week. They're on a big drive. We know they got James Key, obviously, last year from McLaren. So they are trying to recoup as they prepare that transition into Audi in 2026. So they're certainly going to be a team who I imagine will look at it. Haas, I would imagine, will look at it because of the Ferrari tie-ups that they used to have. Obviously, David Sanchez used to work for Ferrari up until the middle of last year. He was then placed on gardening leave once he accepted the position with McLaren. He served out that gardening leave. He joined McLaren on January the 1st in this big sort of three-tier system that they had in place. He was the head of performance, I believe it was. So he probably hasn't had that much time to impact on the car, if I'm being brutally honest. I don't think he's had enough time to be able to influence what that design is, what their performance is, and where they're going with that. He used to be the head of chassis, I believe, at Ferrari, but don't quote me on that one. But either way, it's interesting to know that straight away they've come to this agreement that it's not going to work out. I imagine there's a payoff involved. That's probably one of the reasons behind it. They've had a bit of a shuffle around with Rob Marshall, who obviously joined at the same time. He's got a slightly different role. Andrea Stella has taken over from this role that's now vacant from David Sanchez leaving until they find someone else coming in. We've got Andrea Stella talking about how it's going to be 12 months before they can get the weaknesses in that McLaren sorted. This seems to all be tied up. Whether or not that this is what David's identified when he's joined the team, that he's gone, actually, you're X amount of time away, and they've come to the conclusion that actually they need to take a different direction and that David isn't the person to do it, remains to be seen. Both have been very complimentary about it. Both seem quite sort of, okay, let's just get out there and let's just go with it. Another team who may be interested may be Visa Cash App RB. We know, of course, that Laurent Mecchi is the team principal there. Obviously, has got a great relationship with David Sanchez from their time together at Ferrari. So I wouldn't be surprised to see if there is a vacancy there, whether or not he has slotted into that one, although they've obviously just done their recruitment in that department. Williams, Alpine, two notable ones, but obviously Williams have brought Pat Fry in, so not too sure they would be keen for it, but certainly Alpine, who are on the lookout for technical people, might be having a look at David Sanchez to say, actually, can we get a deal done here, because they need all the help they can get done currently. But that's the big news. Shuffle again at McLaren. Andrea said, quoted, he doesn't think it's going to be 12 months before they can sort the weakness out in the MCL 38M. So it's going to be tough for McLaren fans, I feel, this season. It doesn't feel they've made the jump they wanted to over the winter, which feels really harsh because they made that dramatic jump halfway through last season. I think they kind of wanted an Aston Martin winter style jump, and it's not happened for them. It's not materialised for them. So I think from that point of view, that's where they're at. Be interested to see who goes into McLaren in terms of obviously filling that role. But that's pretty much it for that sort of news. What else we've got? We've got Mercedes news. Now, Mercedes have got engine problems. Some Mercedes haven't struggled with for a number of years, really. It looks like it's partly due to new layout at the W15. Now, we know that when the W15 was produced, they've obviously gone fully with their side pod concept version rather than the very small, slim, zero side pod that they currently run, with the W13 and W14. I had to think then what W it was. So those ones, the new layout doesn't seem to be suiting the Mercedes. James Allison, he kind of gave a bit of a snippet away when he talked about the Mercedes performing better in low temperature. What that is, that they seem to have a cooling problem. Now, we're not quite sure what's causing this. We're not quite sure what it is, whether it's supplier based, whether or not it's Mercedes powertrain based, but the new engine isn't at full capacity for the Mercedes teams, and that includes some of the customer teams as well. So Aston Martin, Williams. In terms of engines and what happened in Australia, we're going to cover Australia in the coffee chat at the next part. But Lewis Hamilton's engine, which obviously led to his retirement in Australia, is not salvageable, It is replaceable. It's not salvageable. Completely wrong way around there. Excuse me on that one. So Lewis will have a new engine for Japan. We think George is going to take a new engine for Japan purely because his current one from Australia wasn't back in time to be checked and shipped out to Japan. So I think George's engine is going to go back into the pool. Lewis's, they still don't know what happened with it. So his engine is complete and put. So that's out of the pool, and he will be taking a new one. With George's one, obviously under the current rules and regulations, there's a potential they can fix it and add it back in. So if he needed it later on in the season, he could do that. So I think that's the plan for George's engine from what I can gather so far. But Lewis's is unsalvageable. They don't know what's wrong with it. And therefore, he's definitely got a new engine ready for the Japanese Grand Prix this week. Other news from Mercedes, Toto Wolff is now apparently flying out to Japan. Those who have followed Mercedes will know for a while that with Toto, he does schedule races where he doesn't travel. So he sets it up in his home in Monaco. He does it all virtually, and he doesn't actually travel to the track. Japan was one of these pre-scheduled races he was due to miss. A lot of speculation on why Toto keeps missing Japan, because previously it's always been Japan, no matter what time of the year it's been. But we're hearing from Mercedes that he is now travelling to Japan, obviously on the back of probably some fan feedback, I'd say, and maybe some criticism from the fans as well. But we are led to believe that Toto will be in Japan. Obviously, until he arrives there, we don't know for sure. They've got Kimi Antonelli in a test in Austria on, I believe it's the 16th of April. Certainly that week, so certainly in a week or so, he's going to be tested in the W12, I believe it is. I thought it might have been W13 at first to get in the ground effect cars, but it is the W12. Now, with regards to the W12 and the running, they will have a limited lapse on that as much as they've got the track hire for. There's no restriction on it from, obviously, the FIA because of the fact it's all regulation cars. It's a system that Aston Martin used for Felipe Drugovich. It can count towards your super license points as well. So it is also handy to do. You can do so many sort of laps and you can get so many points for it. I'm genuinely not sure of how many points you get and how it works, but I know you can then prove to the FIA. So it does help with super points license. And it's part of what they're calling their Formula One acclimatization pack. So this is a plan that they've got for Kimi, whether or not he comes into Formula One or not next year, where he's going to get experience in the Formula One car. And I imagine it's Toto literally seeing what he can deliver in that car. So be interesting to see what comes out of it. We don't normally get lap times. If we do, they're normally very, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for? They're very heavily marketable lap times. So yeah, we saw with Danny's one with the Red Bull tyre test at Silverstone, where you don't get an actual lap time, but Christian was going, he'd put him on the front row with Max at Silverstone in that car, that side of things. So I always take these testing times with a pinch of salt when they come out. It's never really, unless you've got the actual lap data, you can't tell. You can't tell what they run in terms of fuel load, can't tell what they run in tyres, setup, weather conditions, all of those factors which normally play a part in delivering a decent time or comparing times goes out the window. So I always take it with a pinch of salt. So just be wary about that when you hear it. But Kimi is testing in W12 in Austria at the Red Bull Ring. So will be good to see what he can finally do in a Formula One car. Had a bit of a difficult start to F2. Ollie Behrman is currently outperforming him. So yeah, having Ollie as a teammate is a good benchmark for Mercedes, and also it's a good benchmark to see where Ollie's stacking up as well in terms of his hopes for a grid slot next year. So yeah, that's the big news from them. In terms of other news, BBC running a report on Christian Horner and the allegations against him. I don't want to go into it because it doesn't feel like it's given much new evidence, if I'm honest. It just talks about how the person who's raised the complaints can't talk because of an NDA, and then it's a bit cryptic about they're just following the process. It feels like a bit of a clickbait, if I'm honest. After reading it, it feels like it's just designed to get more clicks and views on it during a race week, so it doesn't really give us any new information. So I'm not going to delve too much onto that one. Stake at F1 and wheel guns. We don't know if they've got a fix for Japan. We know that the wheel gun issue they're having is a software issue. So it's not the actual wheel guns, it's the software that's loaded into the wheel guns. For those who don't know, these wheel guns are absolutely loaded with technology. So they tell you reaction times, how long it takes to take the nut off. All of these things go into these wheel guns. You don't just literally put it on. Well, you do literally put it on and pull it off. But what I mean is there's a lot of information, a lot of technology that goes into making them work. Stake F1 are clearly struggling with theirs. They've made a design change. It's not worked for them. The one thing you have to remember is anything to do with pit equipment comes out of your cost cap. So I've seen a lot of people online saying, well, just go buy some new wheel guns, buy some new system. It's not as simple as that. There's a cost involved that. You've got to make sure those guns work. The guns actually work. There's obviously a software problem. So I don't think getting a replacement gun would actually help in Stake's case because they've got a software problem they need solved first. A bit of talk about that's not going to be resolved until we get to the European tracks. They haven't actually said yes or no to that one. They are working on it. They've said they're working around the clock on it. It might be something that can be done remotely. It might be something that we have to wait until the European legs. If we have to wait until the European legs, then Stake F1 are in big trouble. Their car has got potential. The team needs to get some points on the board. And at the moment, you can't when you're doing 20, 30-second pit stops. So whichever way you look at it, no matter what you've got in terms of car strategy, it's all going out of the window for the team based on those pit stops. And I think that's pretty much it for the Espresso news. I don't think there's much more to talk about. Let's head on into the coffee chat and a roundup of Australia. What we're going to do, I think we're taking my team order. I'm not going to dwell on these. It's been 2 weeks. Most people have already listened to views on it. Most people have talked about what happened in there. A couple of points I want to touch on. Obviously, what happened at Williams with Logan Sargent, and obviously what happened on the last lap between George and Fernando. So let's dive right into it. Ferrari, Carlos Sainz, P1, Charles Leclerc, P2. Absolutely great performance from them. 1 and 2. Charles also getting the fastest lap. Ferrari be well happy with that. With Max obviously going out of the way, we'll come on to. They would expect you to be able to pick up the win above Checo. They've done that. They've made some really good points. Carlos will be delighted that he finished in first place. Charles, after they made the changes in FP3 and for qualifying with the rear beam wing, didn't look as comfortable as the car as what he did in FP1 and FP2. So whatever Ferrari changed certainly didn't suit Charles because up until then he was kind of flying. So whatever that adjustment they made didn't suit him. But 1 and 2 for Ferrari, nailed it, take the points. Really happy for Carlos. Interested if Carlos hadn't missed his previous race with appendicitis, he'd probably be looking at leading the constructors, leading the drivers' championship, and potentially Ferrari being at the top of the constructors' championship with the points they would have got. Possibly not the constructors because they obviously scored with Ollie Behrman, but certainly Carlos would have been at the top, if not leading the drivers' championship, that's for sure, if he'd been able to race in all of the season openers. So, yeah, then we've got Lando P3, Oscar P4, bit of controversy around the place swapping. I'm okay with it. I can see why McLaren did it. You know, Lando had the early pace. Oscar only got the jump on him because he got the undercut. The one thing I will say, I didn't like Andreas Stella saying that it was because he didn't want them to race. We're early in the season. McLaren aren't in the hunt for a championship at all. I don't think they will be realistically in terms of the Constructors' Championship. So I think let them race. They're evenly paced. If that was the main reason behind it, I'm a bit disappointed in Andreas Stella this early in the season, you know, protecting Lando and not letting Oscar go after him. I know Oscar, certainly in the second stint, completely fell off and wasn't near him, but even so, I would like to have seen that if they could have raced, but it is what it is. It's up to McLaren at the end of the day. I hope they bring upgrades together. I think they're going to be strong in Suzuka. The car should suit them. It's got a lot of characteristics of last year. That suited the Japanese track. So, yeah, I'm expecting good things from McLaren, but 3rd and 4th, brilliant start to the season compared to last year. They'll be taking that despite what's happening off the track. Then Red Bull, we've got Checo, P5, and then obviously Max DNF. Checo got a tear off stuck underneath his floor, apparently, according to Christian Horner, which compromised his performance. He was going past Alonso. He got that strip caught under. Tear offs becoming a big problem, certainly this season. But in terms of performance, this is where they want Checo to, you know, kind of step up to the plate a bit. So when Max isn't in the points, this is where Checo should be getting that P1, P2 position, and he didn't do it this weekend again. And this is going to be his downfall, if anything, in terms of retaining himself for next season, because Checo needs to be P2 in the championship and needs to deliver the constructors for Red Bull. That is, I think, his target. If he gets that, I think he's safe. If he doesn't get that, it might leave him open to potentially a replacement. One thing I will say is I don't think any of the other drivers who are in the frame to replace Checo are performing currently, which might be a saving grace. But even so, I think Red Bull expect him to step up a bit more. Now, Max DNF'd on lap 3 after basically driving with effectively the handbrake on for 3 laps. They think it was a setup issue. It's not a known issue to do with the brakes. They're not expecting any problems in Japan this week. They're not expecting it to cause any major problems going forward. It was literally when they put the brake back together, someone didn't quite do it right, and lo and behold, it stayed on, caught fire, put them out of the race. So Brembo is saying it's not an issue with the brake. Red Bull are not really confirming that it was a mistake putting it back together, but that's what we're hearing. So I'll take that one as what it is. I don't see it being any issue. No one else is struggling with it, and a lot of teams use the same sort of brake. So then we've got obviously Lance Stroll in P6 and Fernando Alonso in P8 for Aston Martin. I think that's pretty much well expected. Stroll's had a good start to the season. He's behind Fernando in the Drivers' Championship, be it quite a few points, but still, he's closer to Fernando than what he has been for previous starts of the season. I think he's quietly gone about it. We know he struggled obviously last season with his injuries. Do I think Stroll will stay at Aston Martin? No, I don't. I think he's got one more season after this year potentially. I think 2026 might see a change about, if there's a change of ownership with Aston Martin, that might see a change about as well. But I do think he's performing better this year than what he was. Obviously, he put it in the wall. In last race, there's that brilliant quote saying, "Can you bring the car back?" No, because I'm in the wall. In terms of radio messages, I thought that was a pretty good one. Then we've got obviously Fernando PA after his 20-second penalty. We'll come on that one in a minute at the end of going through these when we talk about that incident. But again, some solid points. But Aston Martin, I think, are going to be disappointed with their starts of the season. I think Fernando's disappointed. I think that's why he's shopping around. We know Mercedes are in the frame. Some loose talk about Red Bull. I don't believe that, if I'm honest. But with Fernando, he feels like he's either going to retire or he wants to see what the upgrade package is doing. He's got a contract on the table with Aston Martin, but he hasn't said whether or not he's going to sign it, whether or not he's going to stay in Formula One. We know he will look at Mercedes if it's an option. Flavio Briatore will be open about that. Flavio Briatore actually underwent heart surgery about a week ago, so he's going to be, I would imagine, out of commission for a bit. So that might make a difference to Fernando and what he's doing, because they might wait for Flavio to recover, obviously being Fernando's manager, before any contracts are signed anyway. So don't be surprised if at the moment that kind of goes stalemate. That driver market is pretty much plateau at the moment. That's because we're waiting for Red Bull and Mercedes to make their move, or everyone else's, I should say. But yeah, P6, P8 for Aston Martin. Visa Cash App RB, we got Yuki Tsunoda, P7, really good performance from him. And Daniel Ricciardo, P12, disappointing result for him. Now, Yuki drove a pretty solid race. He was there with that bounce. He got the points. He got 6 points for the team. He'd be happy with that. He'd be happy that he's outperformed Daniel. It's where Yuki needs to be. We know that he's probably going to keep his seat for another year. We know he's tied in with the Honda deal. I don't realistically believe that Yuki is an option for Red Bull. I've said this many a time. I think they would have made that move already. But I do think he will keep his Visa Cash App RB seat, which then leaves the second seat of Daniel being the one that potentially Liam Lawson may come into. So I think Daniel needs a big performance and needs one soon. The comments from Damon Hill were quite interesting this week, where Damon said that he needs to stop over driving the car. He needs to actually just concentrate on driving it and wringing the neck out of it and getting results. He feels that Daniel's going for perfection in that car, and that he feels that that's compromising him, when what he needs to do is just get results and get that in any way possible. So I'll see what Damon's saying. Daniel is that sort of driver. We know that he's a confidence-driven driver. He always has been. We saw that at McLaren. I don't believe he become a bad driver, so I think the potential's still there. If anything, it goes to show that the Visa Cash App RB is not a direct copy of Red Bull. We said it wasn't. A lot of media outlets speculated it was going to be. A lot of talk online about it. Like I said last year, it wasn't ever going to be, because you can't buy the aero parts from Red Bull. It was only ever going to be the suspension, the engine, the gearbox, all the parts you can buy. But the aero package you can't do, and that's showing with Visa Cash App RB. They can't get the aero right on that car. A lot of improvements. They brought a new rear wing for Australia. They're hoping to build on that one. So interested to see where they go. Interested if Daniel can get closer to Yuki. If he gets a good result in Japan and starts performing close to Yuki, I think we see his confidence and his stock soar. He's good for the sponsors, and I think that they want to give him time. So I don't believe he's under threat like we've heard from the comments about that Helmut Marko has given a couple of races. I don't think that at all. I think commercially he's very valuable to the team. engineering. He's very valuable to the team. He brings a lot of experience, a lot of talk around setups, a lot of, he's drove for some big teams. So I think that experience is vital to develop him. And I think that Lauren Mackey would want to give him a season as well. So yeah, it remains to be seen what they do sort of summer going onwards. But I think that Daniel's okay for now, but I think he needs some good performances like Damon alluded to. Then we've got the Haas team of Hulkenberg P9 and Magnussen in P10. Good performance from those two, both in the points. They'll be happy with that, happy with their start to the season. Komatsu's done well since he's come in. He obviously played down the start of the season. We talked about it on the last podcast. They've come out pretty much fighting. They've got some good early points while the Williams, the Stake F1 guys are struggling. So, yeah, fair play for him to capitalise on that. Alpine is struggling. So I think Haas are doing the right thing. They're getting the points while they can. They look like they're just solid and steady, I'd say, at the moment, so nothing spectacular, but both drivers are up and in amongst it. We know there's obviously talk of Ollie Behrman coming in next year. Which one will he replace? I think Magnussen's probably looking a bit more vulnerable if they can keep Nico Hulkenberg. A lot of talk of Nico Hulkenberg going to the Audi project. I don't know if that's just paper talk, wanting a German driver. I'm not sure how much truth is in that, or if he's a better replacement than someone like Valtteri Bottas, for example. But yeah, I think that Hulkenberg would potentially be their first choice to keep. And then if they were going to bring someone like Ollie Behrman on due to the pressure they're going to get from Ferrari to bring in their driver, that's where K-Mag might come under pressure. But either way, at the moment, both drivers in the points in Australia, solid start to the season. Komatsu's doing well. Obviously, Komatsu's home Grand Prix in Japan. It's going to be interesting to see the Haas reaction in Japan. It's always been quite good there. We know Japanese absolutely love their racing, love the DRS hats, but I'm really intrigued to see what sort of reception Ayo Komatsu gets, because I think it's going to be a bit mental. Yeah, we're going to have all Japanese lineup in terms of Visa Cash App RB in FP1 with their rookie session bringing in a Japanese driver as well. So they got two Japanese drivers, Japanese team principal, Honda's home race for obviously the Red Bull and Visa Cash App team. Yeah, it's going to be quite good to see. Then we've got Alex Albon, P11. Logan Sargent did not start. My thoughts on this one, I think that Williams missed an opportunity here. I don't agree with James Vowles giving Alex the car. I understand the business case. I took a lot of flack for it. I get what they're doing, but ultimately it failed. Alex Albon got P11. He didn't get any points. So therefore, it's a failure. And yes, that is the blunt way of looking at it. Now, a lot of people have said that Logan Sargent wouldn't have performed better. That's kind of debatable. The teams and the drivers behind Alex Albon all struggled with various issues. So I think that Logan, if he stayed clean, if he stayed in the race, he might have had a good chance to get in or around that position, which then would have been a great confidence boost. If Logan Sargent had got P11 and just missed out on the points, we would have been talking about what an amazing performance it was from him. Now, I know that we shouldn't be doing that because Alex is a better driver. I appreciate that, but how great would it have been for his season and him if he'd been able to say that and go, actually, look, I've got this P11 drive, I'm full of confidence, I'm willing to go. Instead, James Vowles would have completely shot his confidence. By taking his car and basically saying, we don't trust you to get points, we're going to trust Alex in it. That is a massive confidence driver. So, yeah, I'm not too sure that was the best move that they made, but they've done it. So there we go. Then we've got Alpine with Pierre Gasly P13 and Esteban Ocon P16. Esteban fallen foul of the visor tear off in his duct, I believe it was, compromised his race. Gasly, did he have a good race? No, I know that people will point to P13, but he only got P13 because Stake F1 can't actually do a pit stop within sort of half a minute. So it's not an improvement really from Alpine. They have got some upgrades due. I don't know what those upgrades are going to bring, if they're going to bring anything. They desperately need it. They desperately need some direction. I still think Andretti should buy them. I stuck by that when that announcement first came out. But I do think that Andretti should buy them. I think that at the moment they're struggling. I don't think the board are completely committed to resurrection Alpine. I know we're in a cost cap here and that makes it a bit difficult, but it feels like very much trouble at Alpine. And it feels like they don't have the team to turn it around. So I think that once the likes of Stake can get their pit stop sorted, I think that Alpine are going to be rooted to the bottom. Tracks like Monaco might help that side of things. But either way, Alpine are a team on a downward spiral. Then we got the Stake F1 team of Valtteri Bottas, the honorary Australian in P14, and Joe in P15. Pace is quite good with the Stake team. but they can't get the pit stop sorted. And until, like we said earlier, until they can do that, they're in trouble. They're gonna struggle all the way through the season if they can't get that fix in place, because no matter how good you are, no matter how good your pace is, no matter if you're competitive or not, if you can't get your pit stops done, it's curtains, isn't it? So yeah, Stake F1 be disappointed. They felt the need to apologise to Valtteri Bottas. I don't think Valtteri wants an apology. I think he wants a sub 10-second pit stop, if I'm honest. That would be what he would want, not an open apology from Stake F1 saying how they're working on it. I think he wants a wheel gun that takes his wheel off within a time that can get him some points. So remains to be seen when that fix is coming. Like I said, Stake F1, 13th, 14th, disappointing. Then we've got Mercedes. What a disappointment. Russell, DNF, and Hamilton, DNF. Now, Lewis, as we know, engine trouble, like I said, they don't know the cause. Engine is kaput, needs a new engine. Not a lot you can say about it. George, last lap incident with Fernando Alonso. Lots of controversy online about this one. A lot of opinion. I'm struggling with this in terms of what I think of it. Now, do I think it's a penalty? Yes, I do, because of how the stewards described it. So if you go back and look at the report from the stewards, it's very articulate. It goes into a lot of detail. It says how Fernando took a different line. Now, people will come at me and say, of course, he's taking a different line. He's a leading car. He's entitled to. Yes, he is. But when you've got a driver who took a different line, who then braked, de-accelerated, and took that different line all on the last lap, it kind of feels like it was a sly brake check from Fernando, if I'm honest, to drag George in. Now, do I believe that Fernando wanted George to crash? Absolutely not. I don't believe that was his intention at all for 1 second. I think it was designed to do exactly what he was doing, pull George in. George would hit the brakes. He would then be out of DRS when it comes to the DRS activation zone on turn 6, and therefore he would then, not beat Fernando on the run down and finish the race, which I think Fernando was very conscious that George was going to do. Now, would it have been a penalty if George hadn't crashed? And the answer to that is no, it wouldn't have been. And this is where I'm torn between the two, because they would not have looked at that data if George hadn't crashed. So if George had backed off and gone for the corner, absolutely fine. The stewards would have had no reason to look at it, so therefore it wouldn't have been a penalty. So, we're kind of dishing out a penalty for the incident. But if the incident had played out differently, it wouldn't have been a penalty. And that's what I'm struggling with in my head, because like I say, I absolutely agree with the stewards in terms of the telemetry, what they saw, how they described it. But like I say, if George had just backed off in that corner and then gone into that corner, safety behind, not got caught up in dirty air and not gone off, it would never have been investigated, never been a penalty. They wouldn't have even looked at it, let alone give that in-depth telemetry review. It would have just been that it was a great sort of Fernando defense from him. Where do I think it stacks up with regards to Kevin Magnussen holding everyone up in his DRS chain? The one thing I'd say about Kevin Magnussen when he's doing his defensive moves, he drove consistently slow. We're talking one lap, one corner where Fernando did this. So I think it's very different. It's an isolated incident against someone driving deliberately slow to hold a group of people up. So I do think it's different on that front. What I will say, though, is with regards to Fernando is, he's got a right to defend his line. He's got a right to do that. But I think it's the three combined. I think it's the fact he lifted, he took a different line, and he braked all within that one corner, which is normally a fast corner, pretty much taken flat out, is where the stewards have deemed it unsafe. You've got to have a bit of trust as a driver. So you've got to have a bit of trust that they're going to do that. I think if Fernando had potentially just lifted going into the corner, then he probably would have got away with it. But I think all three combined is why the stewards have done it. In terms of the time penalty, it's standard, drive-through penalty, converted 20 seconds. So disappointing for Fernando. Like I say, if George hadn't had the crash, I don't think he would have been investigated or looked at. So like I say, I struggle with that because I do think it's a penalty when you see the evidence that the FIA gave. So it's one of those. Aston Martin on appealing. It's gone by the wayside as such. A lot of people pointing the finger at George. A lot of people pointing the finger at Fernando. I think Fernando knew exactly what he was doing. Like I said, I don't think he intended to cause an accident, but I think his intention was quite clearly to slow down George so he didn't get the run off in turn 6 and the DRS going down and overtaking him. So I think that's where it all comes into play. But I think it will divide opinion online. It will divide opinion between fans. But likewise, there isn't that much we can do about it. It's just if it happens again, and are we penalising the result of an action rather than penalising the action itself is probably the biggest debate with the FIA currently. And that is pretty much your race roundup for the Australian Grand Prix. So let's get on with Japan and looking forward to that one. Right, on to Japan. Circuit 5.807 kilometres, 53 laps, 307.471 kilometres according to the data. Lap record held by Lewis Hamilton in 2019 with a 130.983 and the first Grand Prix in 1987. Max Verstappen was obviously the winner last year. Weather forecast is looking a bit dicey in Japan. It's currently raining. We know there's showers forecast. It's a lot earlier. We're in April rather than the autumn, like I alluded to earlier. Pirelli are bringing with them the C1, the C2, the C3 compound tyres, so the toughest compounds that we got. We know that degradation is an issue here. In terms of pit stops, it's got one DRS zone. Pit stops, what can we expect? Potentially, it might be a one stop, but I think two stop is looking more likely with the weather conditions and just the temperatures. Obviously, that's dependent on rain. It'll all go out the window if the rain hits for the Grand Prix itself. But we are looking at, with the lower temperatures, it might be a one-stopper. But degradation here normally puts you in a two-stopper, if I'm honest. But we know we've got the hardest compound. I think that Ferrari and Red Bull are going to be the teams to beat. I think Red Bull will be out in front. I think Ferrari will be the second closest team. I think we're then going to get McLaren very close to Ferrari. And then I think you're going to have Aston Martin and Mercedes behind them in that order as such. So I think if you're looking at podiums, you've got to be looking at potentially sort of out of those top three teams. So my prediction at the moment, I'll probably go for, let's have a punch, shall we? I would go for early doors, Max P1, Charles in P2, and then Lando in P3. So let's mix up the podium, three different teams. Max will go well around here. He loves the track. It suits the Red Bull. We know the RB20's got upgrades. So the RB20 looks like it's bringing a new floor, which if that works is going to be a disaster for the rest of the grid. Max is going to have a chip on his shoulder from the DNF in Australia. His 100% record is gone. His chance to win every race is gone. Red Bull's chance to win every race is gone. I'm expecting in front of the Honda big wigs here that, Max will command the race and get the win here. I think that Ferrari will then be scrapping. I don't think Checo will have enough over the Ferraris, if I'm honest. I think that'll put Checo in amongst the McLaren drivers. So I'm interested to see if Lando can outscore Oscar. We know the cars are the same. In terms of upgrades, Ferrari are bringing a new rear suspension and something to do with the rear beam wing. It's not a big upgrade. It's a minor one again. But again, it's designed to help with the downforce. Other teams we haven't heard a lot of in terms of upgrades. We don't think too many teams are bringing too much stuff. So we've not heard anything significant from Mercedes or likes of Stake. McLaren haven't talked about upgrades enough. A lot of the teams are now waiting for Imola to start the European leg before they bring upgrades. So we know that obviously after this one, I think we've got, I want to say China, and then I want to say Miami before we hit Imola. Hopefully I got that right. Before the European leg kicks in. Most of the upgrades will come in the European legs. A lot of teams are now using these races at the moment to kind of get some data correlation so that we know that that's what Red Bull are doing with their floor. They're pretty much trying to get the data correlation to know their wind tunnels on track, as we know that Mercedes have struggled with that this season yet again. So, don't be surprised to see a Red Bull dominance this weekend, certainly a Max dominance, I should say, in front of the home crowd of Honda. We know that there's been talk of special livery, the white livery for Red Bull coming back. I don't think it is. I've seen some pictures this morning which makes me think it's a normal Red Bull design. They normally announce it by now, but they might surprise us on that front. But expect Max, expect Ferrari to be strong. Either Ferrari driver, if I'm honest, it depends which one takes to the track. Charles has traditionally gone quite well around here, so I'm expecting that one. Mercedes, I'm not sure they're going to. Lower temperatures may suit them. They might be able to turn that engine that to be 15 up, which may help them. We know Lewis likes the track. He goes well around here. So, outside bet for sort of 5th, 6th, I would put at the moment for Mercedes, unless I see something remarkably different after free practice 1 and 2, and certainly in free practice 3. But I think at the moment, unless the rain completely messes the order up, that's what we can expect from Japan. And that is your quick podcast into all the latest news, all of the latest from Australia, and you'll look forward to the Japanese Grand Prix. So, with that in mind, I will go back to my coffee. If you haven't already, please hit that follow, like I said earlier, that subscribe button, that like button, share, whatever it is you can do. I really appreciate it. If you're not already, please go over onto social media. I'm on all of the major platforms. Just search F1 Coffee Corner, hit the follow button, and there you will get all of the latest breaking news from the world of Formula One a lot quicker than what I can do these podcasts and stuff in. So if you're not already, head on over there. I'll put the links in the description so you can go and see for yourself. But yeah, with that in mind, I thank you all for tuning in, and I will see you next week. Catch you later.